Okay, we are going to be discussing assessing problem behaviors presented by Madison Plunkett. For the introduction, so I am Madison. I am in my final semester at Ball State in the ABA Master's Program, and I will be graduating in May of 2023. I'm currently an RBT at an autism center in Indianapolis, serving children ages 1 to 10 years old. I'm also in my company's fellowship program, so I am collecting hours to ultimately sit for the BCBA exam. In this fellowship program, I create intervention plans, I write BSPs, and I help my supervisor do reauthorizations. After graduation, I would like to sit for the BCBA exam and to remain in a clinic setting. I do have limited experience with behavior assessments. I've observed my supervisor conduct and show me the documents for FBAs through our organization, but I have not completed one independently. We're going to start out with the literature review. So I have 3 articles here. If you double click whenever you have the slideshow, if you double click the Microsoft Word document, you'll be able to access those documents. So we have these 3 literature reviews, 3 documents. One comparing functional assessment-based interventions and non-functional behavior intervention, assessment-based interventions, a systematic review of outcomes, methodological quality of studies. So this document is a review that compares the effectiveness of the function of behavior assessment based on interventions through single case studies. The next one is the validity of functional behavior assessment within a response to intervention framework evidence, recommended practice, and future directions. And this document is an article that discusses evidence for intervention validity of FBAs, designed support plans for children with intense behavior needs, and provides evidence for the treatment utility of FBAs for the behavior support development. And then finally, our third literature review is a survey of functional behavior assessment methods used in behavior analysts in practice. And this document reviews gathered information from a web-based survey that was sent out to behavior analysts about FBAs and about the usefulness and practice of FBAs and FAs. So in this presentation, the questions that we'll be discussing are: 1, how do you determine when you should conduct a functional behavior assessment? What constitutes a problem behavior? What is the difference between an FA and an FBA? What does my organization in particular conduct FBAs, FAs, or both? When should you use an FA versus an FBA? The steps of an FBA, and then finally, how long would the FBA process take from the very beginning to the very end? So we're going to start off by talking about how do you determine when you should conduct an FBA. So the purpose of an FBA is to gather the information about the functional relations between a behavior and the relevant environmental events so that these events can be altered to change the behavior in a desirable way. So in a school setting, the IEP team will be the group of individuals that will determine if the student's behavior is interfering with their learning, and that would begin the process of conducting the FBA for that individual. In a clinic or medical setting, the BCBA would be the one to determine when the behavior is getting to the point of interfering with therapy outcomes. So that would then begin the process of conducting an FBA. And then also parents/caretakers can also ask for FBAs to be conducted to find the function of the behavior, of the problem behavior. So what does constitute a problem behavior? So behaviors that are not considered typically acceptable or socially acceptable. These behaviors do have consistent patterns, and they do vary in severity between individuals. Usually these problem behaviors have a function. That's why we're doing these. That's why an FBA or an FA would come into play, would be to find that function of behavior. So we'd be finding if the function of behavior is attention, escape, sensory automatic, or tangible. So what is the difference between an FA and an FBA? So FAs, environmental manipulation, we manipulate the environment to bring out the problem behavior to then figure out what the function is. So this requires environmental control, and it uses experimental methods to determine the function of behavior. determines the cause of behavior, or what is maintaining the problem behavior. And then in comparison, the FBA, FAs can be used as a part of FBA. The FBAs are just a different way of collecting data and assessing. You can use direct or indirect observation, and FBAs do lean on indirect observations. It does result in the hypothesis of the function of behavior, and FBAs are written into special education laws. So what does my organization in particular conduct? So typically we use FBAs more often than FAs. And I've included this visual on the screen of just a breakdown of the functional behavior assessment. So we start up there with what we're looking at as the FBA. So we're going to look at our indirect methods, which are behavioral checklists, behavioral interviews. Next are naturalistic assessments, that'd be ABC intervention or ABC observations, descriptive assessments, and then finally experimental analysis, so antecedent analysis and functional analysis. So the FA is found in the functional behavior assessment. And then as we move that way in the flowchart, we gain more power at figuring out what the hypothesis of the function of the behavior is. So when should we use an FA versus an FBA? So like I said before, FAs can also be a component of FBAs. So for example, for an individual who displays severe SIB, they might continue to self-harm while an FBA is being conducted. So in addition to using an FA, it's been criticized that it could strengthen that problem behavior. So if you see that might be a cause of conducting an FBA, that's when you would, or an FA, then that's when you would opt towards an FBA. So you don't want something that would function as a reinforcer contingent on the occurrence of that behavior. So what are the steps of an FBA? So there are 4 large steps in an FBA. The first one is defining the problem behavior that needs to be addressed. We're going to do it operationally. Our second is identifying the contextual events, including social interaction and features of the environment that reliably predict occurrence and non-occurrence of the behavior. Third, identifying the events that maintain problem behavior and serve as the function of the problem behavior, such as access to attention or escape from tasks. And then finally, we create an individualized behavior support plan to decrease problem behavior, increasing pro-social adaptive behaviors, and improve, ultimately, the student's quality of life. In general, how long is the FBA process? So it takes about 45 minutes to an hour for the assessment itself. But prior to doing the assessment, you have to obtain consent from the caregiver. You have to review previous data and also observe the client. So it could take as long as a week, maybe shorter, but to be safe, as long as a week to conduct an FBA. So my organization uses the document that is on the screen. It's an open-ended questionnaire about the client, with relevant background information, questions to inform the design of the functional behavior analysis. Any of these questions are: what seems to trigger the problem behavior? What does the problem behavior occur when you break routine? So it kind of gives the BCBA that's going to be conducting the assessment the relevant information they need before they start the process. So in conclusion, what would I like to learn more about? I, in particular, would like to learn more about how these assessments would be conducted in a different setting. Since I am in a clinic setting, I would be interested to see how these assessments would take place in a school or an in-home setting to get that environmental manipulation and environmental control to determine what those functions of behavior are in those different settings. How do the assessments conducted in your field experience placement compare to what you've learned in your coursework? So the assessments conducted in my field experience placements are very similar to what I've learned in my coursework. So there's not much different in between the field experience and the coursework. And then finally, questions for fellow students to respond to their discussion board replies. So what I would like to ask my fellow students: do you have experience conducting either FBAs, FAs, or both in a school or in community or in-home settings? And how do you think that would differ from a school setting? And what did you notice when conducting those assessments in those different settings? Once again, these are my reference copies. So once you have access to this slideshow, you'll be able to double click those and have access to those documents. And then here are my references. Thank you. All right.